Hello, MuskOx Herd. Brad Hoos, founder of MuskOx and host of The Herd, has spoken. Really excited about episode 21 with Lee Jelenic today. Lee is a chief innovation officer of United Wholesale Mortgage, also a former professional hockey player who has some fantastic experiences on Wall Street and with Ford Motor Company. We get into some of Lee's adventures in the business world, about a couple of really tough conversations with two CEOs, one former, one current, of Ford Motor Company. So I think there's a lot to learn from Lee as part of this. One of the things that I love about Lee is his positivity and the importance of believing in one another. Those are great attributes. And again, I know I learned a lot from Lee. So before we get started with today's episode, I just want to remind you about MuskOx men's outdoor apparel. If you haven't yet had a chance to check out MuskOx, do yourself a favor and go to GoMuskOx.com for the fantastic gear you need for your next adventure. But with no further ado, I'm very excited to share my conversation with Lee Jelenic. Lee Jelenic, welcome to The Herd Has Spoken.
Brad, really happy to be here. I've been very excited about this day for a little while now.
Yeah, well, I want to just go ahead and jump right in. Excuse the dad joke, which you might not have even picked up on. But tell me what you know about Jump Magazine.
Oh, no, you didn't. You didn't. Oh, man. That one is a blast from the past. Jump Magazine was a short-lived but prolific magazine, teen magazine. Probably had an amazing run, I would say maybe between 1998 and 1999. But I happened to be in, I think, the first issue. There was, I was walking across, I was an undergrad at Yale. I can't believe you pulled this one out, man. You did it. I was walking across the campus at Yale. I think I was a sophomore. And this young lady walks up to me and says, "Hey, I work for Jump Magazine. We've got our premiere issue coming up, and we're doing a feature on Ivy League guys." And I thought, and she said, "Are you interested? You know, it's this whole theme of are you guys looking for brains or beauty?" And I mean, look, I'm 19 or 20 walking across campus going to class. I mean, it took me about 3 seconds to say sure. So anyway, it's funny because I'm moving right now, and I think I'd blocked that one out, but I found a copy of The Jump Magazine. And I don't think the magazine stayed in business too long.
Which is really a shame based upon the spread that I've heard rumblings about of you and a couple of your teammates on the Yale hockey team. But obviously you've had a fantastic career that spans across professional hockey and Wall Street and being a youngest executive at Ford and now the chief innovation officer, whatever the heck that means. We'll get back to that at United Wholesale Mortgage. But I want to go back to your childhood in New Jersey. What were things like in the Jelenic household?
Yeah, growing up, and I appreciate the homework you've done there. Growing up in New Jersey, I always say, New Jersey is the most densely populated state in the U.S. So really, only the strong survive in New Jersey. So let's just get that out there. But growing up in New Jersey, I mean, I had one sister. Mom and dad were great. My parents worked very hard. Mom was stay at home and very dedicated to making sure my sister and I kind of had what we needed to grow and succeed. And my dad was a very hard worker and a successful businessman in his own right, but took some risks along the way. I mean, I remember, I got to New Jersey when I was 9, but I was born in Toronto. I lived in Calgary for a bit and Houston, Texas, and then ended up in New Jersey. And one of the things that stuck out in my head, my dad was in the newspaper business, and he was with a company it was with a newspaper in Houston that had been had acquired by a competitor, and he didn't see eye to eye with the company that acquired the newspaper, and he resigned. And I remember there was about 9 months, 10 months when I was 8, 9 years old, where my dad was unemployed. And so we didn't know where the next paycheck was. I mean, we were fine. They had saved money, but he was unemployed, and we didn't know where the next job was going to be. I mean, at one point we thought we were moving to Puerto Rico. We thought we were moving to Colorado. We thought we were moving to San Diego, and it ended up being New Jersey. And got to New Jersey, and the company he was with He was like the number 3 or 4 person. It was a company that owned, some daily newspapers and some weekly newspapers. And within a few years of being there, company was in Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And again, back to this uncertainty in my house, and kind of emerged. The company was acquired by some private equity to come out of bankruptcy. And when the dust settled, they made my dad the CEO. And so, my dad had been someone who, he was born in Northern Ontario, a town called Sudbury. Both of my parents are from there. And he played college football in Canada and a little bit of semi-pro football in Canada in a league just below the CFL. My parents are both very hard workers, very dedicated, and they believe so much in the American spirit that even though they were longtime Canadian residents before being in the U.S., they really identified with, in the U.S., it doesn't matter your pedigree. It doesn't matter. The great thing about our country, it doesn't matter who you know or who's in your network as much as how hard you're going to work and can you do the job. And so seeing my dad kind of go from these periods of uncertainty in the middle of his career, late 30s, early 40s, to then becoming CEO. And, newspaper industry is not easy, of course, but he was able to take that company public, by 1997. And, the ending wasn't great. 12 years later, we can talk about that. 13 years later, what happened to him and the business. But I just saw then that a couple of things really stuck out to me. One, hard work there is no replacement for it. It's the number one ingredient for success. And then dedication to family, which is what I got from my mom. So seeing those two. And so my sister and I were, very lucky. And our life was much about sports at that time. And I ultimately ended up going and playing hockey at Yale University. And my sister ended up getting a soccer scholarship to Syracuse. And so it kind of felt like that was just the normal thing. I mean, when I look back and you see 2 kids both go on and play Division I sports, I realize now, having a bunch of kids of my own, how rare and how hard that would have been, and how much that's a reflection of my parents. So longer answer than you were looking for, but there you go.
No, that's great. What were the expectations like in your house in terms of academic and athletic success for you and your sister?
Yeah, I think, when I think about, if I go back to that environment, it was almost like if you weren't doing well in school, nothing else mattered, with regard to, of course, be a good person, be a decent human being, but outside of sort of the basics of being polite and respectful, my parents instilled in me, hey, there's one thing that matters here, and it's school, and everything else in your life is second to that. And so it wasn't like they forced us with tutors and forced us with a bunch of extra work. And it wasn't like there was summer school. It was more just like, hey, this is your main priority. You got to go handle this. And that's, they weren't saying that when I was 6, but, by the time I was 12, 13, it was pretty clear, hey, we'll support you. We'll travel all over the country for your hockey or baseball or whatever it is. But if you're not doing well in school, if you're not being your best in school, all this stuff's going to go away pretty quickly. And so I think that was where, there was this instilled value of working hard at things that are really important, like education.
Yeah. So hard work sounds like it's the foundation for everything that you guys did in your family. And obviously it's been a key part of your success. As you were growing up, clearly athletics were a big deal in your family, and you were pursuing both baseball and hockey. And this seems to me like probably one of the first really big decisions that you had to make in your life in terms of which sport you were going to continue to pursue. How did you go about making that decision?
I appreciate the question, Brad. So it was hard because when I was 15 or 16, it started to be clear that I was pretty decent hockey player. And, there was some Ontario Hockey League teams that were scouting me, and a couple of NHL scouts had come to see me. And obviously there were some college scouts coming, and they were all saying to me that in order to reach my potential in hockey, I was going to have to leave New Jersey. And it was either go out to Iowa, the Midwest, Iowa or Nebraska and play in the United States Hockey League, the USHL, the top level junior league, or go to New England and go to prep school. And they basically, I mean, I had NHL scouts, college scouts basically saying, look, you've got potential, 15, 16-year-old, but if you stay here in New Jersey, it's not a hockey hotbed. It kind of is now, but back then it wasn't in the late 90s. You can kiss your hockey career goodbye. At the same time, had been a pretty decent ball player and had kind of been lucky to grow up with a group of very good ball players. My best childhood friend growing up was a guy named Kevin Barry, who ended up pitching parts of 5-6 seasons with the Atlanta Braves. So he was my grade and he was my best buddy. And I had another really close friend that ended up going on a baseball scholarship to Drexel. So there was a good group of baseball players. Another baseball player ended up going and playing basketball at Lehigh. So really good athletes. And I started to get some attention in baseball that I didn't expect to get. And it was from really cool schools. It was like Ohio State, Wake Forest. These were schools that were sending me letters, inviting me out. And so I actually got to a point where I said, well, I don't want to leave New Jersey. I want to prove that I can carve my own path as an athlete. I really enjoy where I live. I don't want to give up my last 2 years of high school to go live in a billet family in Iowa. I certainly my father let me go to a training camp in the OHL. The max you could stay was 48 hours before you lose NCAA eligibility. So I stayed 48 hours and came home. But the decision went on really late. And I actually remember, and I give this advice to kids that I talk to all the time, and whether they're athletes that are being recruited or just kids that are trying to make that decision, where am I going to go to school? You feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. And if you don't get in somewhere, or if you make the wrong decision, and I look back and say, look, there really aren't wrong decisions. You're going to end up making the right one as long as you bring your A game wherever you go. And I'll speak a little bit. There's a quote that I heard later on in life where I look back on that and say, well, of course that's the way it works. But it really came down to, I found myself having an opportunity with Yale hockey. There were a few other Ivy League schools that were very interested, and the baseball schools were all over the map. And I remember my dad just sat down with me and said, look, you've made pretty solid decisions on the ones we've let you make. My mom she chimed in too. And she just said, look, you've got a chance to go play Ivy League hockey. We grew up near Princeton watching some Ivy League hockey games. And they just said, look, we'll support you, whatever you do, but this is something you'll thank us later for kind of steering you in this direction. And so then I ended up, going to Yale, and of course the culture on the Yale hockey team. And those are some of my best friends in the world today. I still I have a text chain with the guys from the 01 Yale hockey class that we talk every day. So one of the best decisions I ever made. But at the time you feel like, oh, I'm going to set my life on the wrong track if I screw this up. And it's just not true, you know?
Yeah, and I love hearing that, and I feel like there might be a little nugget in here that's pretty interesting, because I feel like there's something in you that really seemed to be motivated by being able to prove people wrong. And so maybe I'm off base, but what I'm hearing you is like there was something extra satisfying for you about being able to stay in your, we'll say it, your de facto home state of New Jersey, and being able to grow to a spot where you could get that D1 hockey scholarship and pursue that path in a way that once you got to D1 hockey in the Ivy League, I mean, clearly that's pretty well respected in terms of making it. And I'm curious if I'm reading that correctly, that finding a way to prove other people wrong added a little extra fuel to your fire.
You know what? It was the kind of the first time I was able to really do that in a big sort of somewhat of a public way. And absolutely. And that's been a theme that I've revisited from time to time. My high school hockey coach used to say, the best way to get Lee to do something is tell him you don't think he can do it. Tell him you don't think he can accomplish it, and he's going to go do it. And that was very gratifying. I went into Yale as a young freshman. So I was one of the few. I mean, college hockey is known for 20-year-old freshmen, graduate high school from wherever you are, go play 2 years as a junior, come in as a 20-year-old. I was able to come in, as a just turned 18, and it was pretty gratifying to be able to say, hey, I did it my way. There had only been one other player from New Jersey up to that point. His name was Jim Dowd. He played 10 plus years in the NHL. He was the only other one that had gone right from New Jersey right to Division I. I think he went to Lake Superior State. So yeah, you're 100% right. And I revisit that multiple times in my journey.
I love it. Well, I wonder here if maybe your coach told you that you couldn't get into the penalty box, because I'm looking back at your stat sheet from your last year at Yale. 28 games, 2 goals, 6 assists. So of course 8 points, but 52 penalty minutes. So I'd love to hear from you. What is your strategy on, like, how would you consider your strategy on the ice to be reflective of who you now are in business?
Yeah. So it's when I look back on college hockey and what it taught me, and I went into Yale as a highly touted offensive player, as a scorer. I certainly hadn't been playing at as high a level of other people that were there, and other people that had come from some of these other places that I chose not to go to. And so when I got there, I really had to scrap and claw, and did not play a whole lot as a freshman. We had a very good team, and really had to grind my way into the lineup. And by basically not giving my coach a chance to not play me. And so I clawed my way in as sort of a third or fourth line checking line player. And that was kind of how I played the 4 years. What's funny is I ended up, when I got to the professional ranks, I sort of got back to, I was one of those rare kids that was a better pro than a college player. And I played pretty regular for the 3 of the 4 years in college. But I certainly realized that at that time, to play as a young freshman or young sophomore at Yale, I had to have every detail of the game. I had to be prepared on and off the ice. And I think those are the things that really I carried from that period of my life into business, which is, there is no excuse for not being prepared. And there's nothing negative that comes from preparation and work ethic. So I made it so that I was always coming into the beginning of the season, crushing it in all of the off-ice testing, having increased muscle mass, decreased body fat, increased speed, measurable things. And so then on the ice, it's kind of the same thing. I mean, it's competition, it's like organized battle. And the way I look at it is, you're not always going to win. There are going to be mistakes you're going to make, but the inexcusable element is to not be outworked, never be outworked. And so for me, I always played a very physical game. I defended my teammates. I thrived on kind of winning physical, combative battles, and probably even to my detriment, I focused even more on that and playing that super scrappy brand of hockey, and even maybe skewed to sacrificing some offense and some skill that I ended up leaning back into for the couple of years I was able to play pro hockey. But it's that scrape and claw. If you're going to beat me, I'm going to make you feel some pain along the way.
What a great attitude. And that's obviously something that translates directly into the business world. And that's something I can certainly personally, attest to as well. One of the things that you've said to me is that believing in others is a superpower. So you've clearly, achieved a lot in your athletic and now professional endeavors. Who believed in you to allow you to achieve your goals?
Yeah, that's core to who I am, is that believing in others is truly like giving them a superpower. And it'd have to start with my mom and dad, because there were points in time where I didn't maybe believe in myself as much as I should have. I mean, we're fragile beings, we're humans. And so, you go on this journey and you're not always riding on a high. You take some blows, you get knocked down. And so I think when I look back, it was obviously my parents. I mean, even when I didn't think I was good enough to play college hockey, or I didn't think I was a good enough college player to play pro, or if I go further, I didn't think I would get into, when I applied for business school, I applied to the top 4. I mean, I applied to where you went. I applied to Booth. I applied to Harvard. I applied to Wharton, and I applied to Kellogg. And maybe you throw Stanford in. I didn't apply to Stanford, but you throw Stanford in there, and I think that's probably generally the top 5. And I mean, I didn't think I'd get in. It's just they're that hard to get in. And my dad, my mom, they believed that I would, And so I think it's them. And then, and they played different roles in the way they believed in me. And then after that, though, along the way, I have to say the ones that really stick out are when I got to Ford. I was very lucky that both Mark Fields and Jim Farley have both, Jim is now the CEO and Mark had been the CEO, both took an interest in me and over time mentored me. And sometimes that meant giving me really hard feedback. Like I remember different times, both of them called me to their office to tell me, not, hey, you're doing a great job, or not, everything you touch turns to gold, but hey, there's like 2 or 3 things you need to fix right now about the way you're approaching certain things. And it was kind of the hard, and they shared it in a certain way where they had gone through and gotten some of that advice on their own too. And I can go into to sort of two of those conversations that I remember very explicitly. But I think those two, and there was others that were senior to me at Ford along the way that believed in me to put me in a job that I certainly on paper wasn't qualified for, where suddenly I'm leading a team of people that have way more experience than I do at whatever it is that team is doing. So I would say my parents, I would say those two. I had some others. I had a couple of professors back at Wharton that certainly saw that I had a very, very unique interest in marketing and in operations. So those are the ones that kind of stick out for me. And, there were some coaches too. I think the one that probably sticks out the most is there was a guy named Kirk Tomlinson who I played for in Flint for the Flint Generals. And this is where I had played 4 years in college as sort of a scrappy 3rd and 4th liner. And I got to Flint and he looked at me and said, hey, you can skate like the wind, you can hit like a truck, and you can hammer the puck. Like you're not a 3rd liner. You should be thinking about the power play. You should be thinking about the first line. I'm going to put you with 2 veterans. And it was just like those moments in time when these people believed in me, it did feel like it gave me that superpower and it transformed what I thought I was capable of. And so I try to do that every day with the teams I lead at work, with the athletic teams I coach. I think the challenge is sometimes where you fall the shortest on that, and this is where we're human, where I grade myself when I'm lying in bed at night, I feel like you fall shortest with the people closest to you. I will make sure the kids I'm coaching on the team feel like I believe in them, all the people that I have the fortune to lead at work, that I believe in them. And then maybe I'm coming down too hard on my kids at home, or maybe I'm not just giving enough of that belief, that superpower into my wife, who's carrying so much of the load. We've got 3 kids, 3 stepkids. We're building a house. So, and then I would say to close the loop on your question, my wife does believe in me, and I think that gives me a little bit of a superpower every day when I get out of the bed or I leave the house. And
it's so powerful to have that. And what I really like about what you mentioned there is that some of those people who believed in you the most were the ones giving you the most challenging feedback. And I think that's so important. And I'd love to hear those conversations that you had with Jim and Mark, but just to set the stage for those that aren't maybe as familiar with Lee's background. So you went from college hockey, you went to pro hockey, and then you had a knee injury, and then you went and moved to Wall Street. People kind of thought you were crazy then, moving to Wall Street to go work at Ford. And now you're climbing the ranks at Ford, and you're getting feedback from 2 CEOs at Ford, as we can now say with the benefit of hindsight. And I'd love to hear what those conversations are like, because obviously you're a high riser, but at the same time, like you've still got a lot to learn. And what were those conversations like, and what did you take from them?
Yeah. So I'll take just a tiny segue, because you hit on a theme before, and I want to you just sort of summarize a couple of them. So it's that whole notion of proving people wrong. And so I will answer your question, but after pro hockey, and I wanted to keep playing, the Buffalo Sabres gave me a chance. They had signed me in Rochester, New York, in the American Hockey League, which is the second best league in the world. And that was a level I never thought I would get to. There I am, one step below the NHL, and this knee just starts to get worse and worse. And it was actually an injury that dated back to my sophomore year of college. It was degenerative cartilage in the kneecap. And I didn't think in May or April of my last pro season, I didn't think by September I'd be 2 surgeries and retiring. But I had a great 3, 4, 5 years, about probably 4 years at JP Morgan. And it was during the credit bubble, 03 to 07. And when I was leaving, everyone was making a lot of money. I had a lot of success. There was, the trading desk at, JP Morgan is obviously one of the preeminent banks in the world. And I remember the head of the desk said, when I told him I'm leaving, I'm going to business school. You're crazy. Why? You can stay here. You're going to be making all this money. You'll be running the desk in a few years. You'll be making all this money.
This is why people go to business school, Lee. You're crazy, right?
Exactly. That was it. You're in a job that everyone wants to go to Wharton to come back and get, or go to Booth and come back and get. And I just said, look, I was so appreciative of my time at JP Morgan and the people there and the culture there. But I just said, there's things that I don't know or do very well now. And I want to go and invest in myself, and I want to learn more. And I've got passions about consumer behavior. I've got passions and interest in supply chain and manufacturing. And I want to go study this and learn this. And I trust that if I get off this train, I'm going to get on another train that's going just as fast. And so I went, and when I was in there, it was kind of the same thing. I went and got an internship at Ford Motor Company in the summer of 2008. And we all remember the world was falling apart in 2008. And it was an amazing time at Ford, because I found this culture of people that they were not going to let that ship go down. And some amazing leadership there. Alan Mulally had just gotten there, and that man is a unifier of all unifiers. And Jim Farley had just gotten there. I got there and I saw this culture. The industry was interesting to me, and I got back to Philadelphia, and my dad was very sick. He had passed away not long after that. But I remember having this conversation with him, saying, "Hey, Dad, I want to go back and work at Ford. I want to go be part of this company that's going to do everything they can not to file bankruptcy, everything they can to make it out." And he just said, "Look, you saw what working in the newspaper industry did to me." He said, "I worked in a dying industry for 25 years. Every year was do more with less. And, it beats you up." And he said, "Are you sure you want to go sign up for that?" That's what these American automakers look like. I mean, at the time, people that know the history remember, Mulally, Nardelli, and Wagoner were testifying in front of Congress, asking for money and asking for bailouts. Well, Mulally wasn't. He was there to support the other two. But
right.
And I said, "Dad, there's just something special. I want to go." And so these twists and turns, and then my decision to join UWM had some similar conversations before. I'm sure we'll touch on. But I think I just wanted, since you highlighted the journey, there was these points in time on the journey where people just said, "Why are you making that decision? Why are you going in that direction?" I mean, consensus would say, go the other direction, go back to Wall Street, stay at Wall Street. Don't run into the burning building that is the U.S. auto industry in 2008. And I had sort of that faith and belief at that time. That by that point, I had realized that I did like proving people wrong. I did like betting on myself.
So you were betting on yourself, and you like to prove people wrong. But was there more to it? I mean, why did you believe in Ford at that time?
It was, again, it was a very special time. There was a lot going on in my life. I mean, my now ex-wife and I, we had our first child. We were living in Philly. My dad was terminally ill with cancer. He passed away at age 58. The sort of financial markets were falling apart. These American institutions, like Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns, were sort of vaporizing overnight. And the autos were struggling too. But when I got to Ford, I had actually, growing up in New Jersey, had never really experienced this. It's truly a family company. I mean, of course, you've got the Ford family, and there's so many wonderful people in the Ford family that are dedicated to that company. But you also have people that are third and fourth generation. Their mother, their father, their grandfather, their aunt, their uncle all worked there. And so there truly is this family orientation to that company. And when I got there, it was like the backs were against the wall. I think I was there when they reported a $8 billion second quarter loss, on the way to losing, I think I might get the numbers wrong, 16 billion in 2008. And the resiliency was something that I had never seen in mass like that. And so for me, I just said, look, I want to I want to be on that team. I want to put that jersey on. I want to put my oar in the water. I want to row. There were so many great leaders there. And so to me, it was literally like you're watching this team play. You get a chance to play for them for the summer as an intern. I said, this is it. I want to be here. And not to mention, I had gone to business school to really become an expert in marketing and operations, and no better intersection than Ford Motor Company.
I love it. So you join Ford, you make that commitment, and now you start to rise up the ranks a bit, right? You're starting to get some pretty meaningful at bats. You mentioned you had some really fantastic mentors along the way, but there was some adversity, right? From what you were sharing, but before, and there was some conversations where they were saying, "Hey, Lee, like this stops right now if you want to continue to progress in this company." Or I'd love to hear more about those conversations.
Yeah, they were great. It was great advice, and there were other mentors along the way. There was a guy named John Felice who, he ran marketing and sales in the U.S. And had a fantastic career there, and really was all about teaching and developing. And so there were so many folks that spent time and took time with me. Another one that comes to mind is Amy Morentic, who she had some huge jobs. She was president of Lincoln China. She ran she ran a number of the marketing teams for the Ford cars and cars and sports cars. But along the way, so I started to get promoted pretty fast. Part of what worked for me was the same sort of micro strategy that had played out. I came in a rotational program, typical of coming out of business school, and there was sort of a specific track you were supposed to go on. And the first job was sort of a upstream product development type role. And then I was supposed to go into a brand manager job. And brand manager sounds great, but when I actually looked at the job, I didn't really see a whole lot of ownership, a whole lot of accountability. It was kind of a jack of all trades, master of none, no P&L, no accountability. Someone else was responsible for sales, hitting the sales number. Someone else was responsible for the marketing campaign and the marketing metrics. So I said, I don't want to do that job. I want to go be a marketing manager. I want to lead a large advertising agency team. I want to have a budget that I'm going to deploy, that I'm going to be held accountable for. And there were some folks that said, this is nobody in this program you're in. Not a lot of people do that. You're the brand manager is the big job. I just said, I don't think I'm going to learn as much in the brand manager job, but I'm not going to have as much of an impact. And
right.
went and did it. Along the way, I had to turn down some opportunities. Early in my career, they had wanted me to move to China, and it just wasn't the right time for the family. And so I turned that down, which, again, I was told if you turn down a promotion, an opportunity to go overseas, man, you're a marked person. You're never getting that opportunity again. And in fact, they asked me 2 more times, and both times it just wasn't the right time for the family. And another time was China, and another time was Dubai, and it wasn't right. Now, I certainly ended up spending a ton of time in China when I was over there with a couple of the other leaders of the Lincoln brand when we were basically creating Lincoln of China. So spent a lot of time there and learned a lot from the people and the culture over there. But those moments along the way where I got the advice. So the first one was Jim Farley, and I had always done my homework, and I had always been prepared whenever I was presenting to Jim or any of our other leaders. And Jim had been the chief marketing officer, and he had a number of roles. And he's a brilliant man, knows the auto industry better than almost anyone. He's very direct, and he's got strong opinions. And so there were times when I was relatively early in my career where I would get into a combative banter with him, which I think he appreciated. But his advice to me at a certain point was, so there was a role that I ended up coming into. It was essentially the strategy lead for Lincoln at a time when we were deciding, do we keep Lincoln? And if we keep it, how does Lincoln become a successful luxury brand? And I got put into the role, and it had been a promotion. And Jim Farley called me to his office, and I walked in, and I thought he's going to shake my hand and congratulate me and tell me that you're the right man for the job. This is going to be great. We're going to make Lincoln a successful luxury brand. This is like 2013. And instead he says, "Hey, look, I didn't want you in this job." It's like, what? He said, "Some other people wanted you in this job. I didn't want you in this job, and I want to tell you why." I said, "Okay." And he said, you talk too much. You're at a point now where you're leading larger teams. You have large responsibilities. You need to listen more. I know you do your homework. I know you have the data. You need to listen more. And he actually told me then a very similar story in his career. He had started his career at Toyota, where a senior executive had a very similar conversation with him. And he said, look, it changed my approach. And I realized I had gotten to a point where I didn't need to prove that I had done my homework. I didn't need to prove that I was smart. I needed to seek to understand other opinions better. And so it was talk less of your opinion at this point, and pull more out of others, pull more, engage people, listen better. And it was fantastic advice. And there was a very similar conversation I had. It was maybe a year or two later with Mark Fields. And again, I was so lucky that both of these gentlemen had repeatedly made time for me. And he kind of called me, and it had been another promotion, and I was actually in a more senior job now, responsible for most of the marketing for Lincoln in the U.S. We were doing a campaign with Matthew McConaughey, and I mean, things were going well. And he called me, and I went to his office. It was 6 a.m. It was dark. It was at the PDC, the Product Development Center. And he just said, hey, look, you've done great up to this far, but you still are bringing the answers to every meeting. You now have to start becoming a better asker of questions. So he told me that you get to a point where if you try to do the senior job, the way you did the junior job, you're going to fail, because there's not enough hours in the day to know every answer. You have to focus on learning how to ask better questions, being more thoughtful. And so the advice I got from both of them was pretty similar. Two different skills. One is listening, and one is actually drawing information and asking questions. But both were pretty hard conversations. So it was kind of like, hey, you've done okay so far, but if you want to keep going, you have to change. And if they hadn't cared, if they hadn't taken the time, I probably wouldn't have had the success that I've had. So I appreciate that very much.
Yeah. And I think so many people, when they actually get that tough feedback, yeah, it takes a minute to swallow it. It can be a shot to your ego, but you really wind up appreciating it and respecting people that much more. And so one of the things that I'm always talking about with my team is like, hey, you need to respect your team enough to have that hard conversation. And I think it's so great to hear, you talk about those experiences in such a vulnerable way, that you had these great, strong leaders tell you like, hey, here's how you need to get better. And now you're looking back at your career and saying like, no, these were critical moments for me where I've really learned, I grew, and now you're clearly a better leader for that. And I think that's something that's really exciting to see. And I think too many people are quick to hesitate or to have those hard conversations, but those are the ones that are really meaningful. So yeah, I want to keep going here in the interest of time, because I know we don't have all day. I would love to hear all sorts of stories, but I do want to at least get a chance to hear about your transition from Ford, which is a large international corporation, one of the most well-respected, well-known brands in the world, and then here you transition to this, maybe not so little at the time. There's still a couple thousand people working for the organization, but you join United Wholesale Mortgage, and you help that organization to grow to a point where it goes public in January of 2021. What was that decision like for you, Lee, as you left the safe waters of Ford and ventured into a high growth organization in the mortgage industry, a totally different industry?
Brad, it was certainly probably the best professional decision I've ever made, and at the same time the scariest. And so I had this great run at Ford, and I had known Matt Ishbia a little, some mutual friends. I'd run into him once in a while, but sort of out of the blue, we got connected and got to talking. And he said to me, this was probably January of 19. He said to me, "Hey, look, we are on a trajectory grow tremendously over the next couple of years. We're right now about 2,000 people. We are taking share. The play we're running is working. I'd really like you to come and join. And I kind of said, to do what? And he said, I don't know what we need, but I know there are things that we're not doing today that we're going to need over the next couple of years. And I want you to come and figure those out and build them. And so I looked at it, and it took me I came to the company, and I had never seen, like, it goes back to my time at 08 when the Ford culture impressed me at that point in time. So, okay, now here I am, 39 years old. I've been at Ford 10 plus years. I come over to Pontiac, Michigan, to this relatively new campus that Matt had built and moved the company here. He'd moved them from a couple towns over, and everyone was positive. Everyone was happy. The smiles, the hellos were all genuine. The energy was electric. And I just thought, there's no way this is real. Like, there's no way. I'm going to come back 2 or 3 times. I'm going to catch him on a gloomy day. I'm going to come back when it's raining one day. And and so Matt and I were talking and talking also to our chief strategy officer, Alex Elezai. We had some conversations, and I kept coming back. And every time there was more people here every time, but there was just this electricity was real. And so I looked at it, and this was a moment when I went to leave Ford, I did have people say, look, this is a bad move. You are on a very short list. At the time I'd been promoted to the executive level at age 37. I was the youngest executive in the company at that time. And, or so they told me. And I always thought there'd be someone younger, some younger exec somewhere. There's always someone better. But, that was one thing they had said. And I said, look, there's a huge opportunity cost that you're walking away from. And I looked at it and said, I'm 39 years old. I've never met anyone like Matt Ishbia. He's this dynamic, energetic, positive entrepreneur. I get a chance to work a little closer to home, 15-minute commute, learn an entirely new industry, figure out where the blind sides are and help build out and protect those. Really walk in with a total blank slate, and really the culture, the positivity, and Matt were the real, those are the real factors. And I just said, look, as hard as this decision feels, if someone came to me and said, this is what I'm facing, I would say you're crazy if you don't give it a try. And so, that was what I came in, and of course, I joined in May of 19. We had about 2,400 team members. Now we're at almost 9,000. We're the number 1 wholesale lender in the U.S. 6 years in a row. We're the number 2 overall mortgage company in the U.S. We went public. We're doing some amazing things. Partnering with like literally tomorrow, we've donated a huge portion of our campus to Oakland County so that they can use for a vaccine staging site. So it's been a chance to do things I never thought I would do in business. And again, Matt's the real deal. Working for him, he's Mount Rushmore business type of stuff. I always tell him, it's like if they put one up with Elon Musk and Steve Jobs, his head should be up there too, right? He's that kind of leader.
Yeah, those are high accolades, but I think that's something that I hear time and time again from those that have gotten a chance to work closely with Matt. From your perspective, what is it that makes him such an elite leader?
He is by far, and this resonates with me because I fancy myself as this way as well, but he is by far the most positive person I've ever met. He just doesn't, the prospect of failure or the risks associated with a decision do not faze him. And he'll be the first to tell you he's made thousands of mistakes, but he will correct course so quickly that you can't remember what the mistake was because you realize it, you admit the failure, and you move on. But it's his positivity, and it's his energy, and it's his passion. And he truly cares. He cares about people. He cares about the business. And so, those things, again, we talked about believing in others is a superpower you can give them. Believing in yourself and being positive, just positive alone, I think is a superpower everyone can choose to give themselves. We all adversity. You faced a lot in your life. You can either, the milk is spilled, you can cry over it, or you can get a towel, wipe it up, and just keep charging forward. And that's the amazing thing about Matt.
So Lee, we appreciate your insights on Matt and you spending, time with us here. But before we let you go, I have just a couple of quick final questions for you. So first off, what is your biggest pet peeve?
It's great. So biggest pet peeve would probably be, I mean, it's like the flip side of what we were just talking about. As you get into your 40s, you start to reflect on what makes you you, and you become a lot more stingy with how you want to spend your time, and you find yourself doing less things because you feel like you have to. You like to do what you want to. And one of the things I found myself, I don't like being around people that are inherently negative for the sake of being negative. And so a pet peeve for me is when I see, even like, it can be kids, right? Teenagers fall victim to this a lot, but just the notion of, I'm going to say something with no intention other than it being a negative thought that I'm expressing about something, about the way I feel. Look, we all have bad days, but negativity for negativity's sake is probably my single biggest pet peeve at this point in my life. And I don't want to be around it, And so, that's my pet peeve. I don't know. What's your pet peeve?
Well, first, let me just say negativity is like parsley. Just push that shit to the side of the plate and get it out of here, right? My pet peeve is actually not nearly as strong and impactful as yours. I really can't stand it when people don't express a tiny bit of gratitude, and where that really irks me is no courtesy wave when you let someone in on the road. So, I do live in Michigan, so here I am making an example of something on the roads, but you go out of your way to let someone in, you wave them in, and you don't get the courtesy wave back. I don't know why that always gets under my skin. So, that's probably mine, but that's something I just really need to get over more than anything.
I am, gratitude and respect are huge on my list. And it's like, yeah, this is the courtesy wave. Come on, how hard is it?
Exactly. No, I so appreciate that. And as someone that was born in Canada, you kind of have to do that. It can get into a Canadian standoff at times almost. And so, no, you go first. No, you go first. No, thank you. Sorry. Right. So you sort of like program where you have to do that. You have to have that part as you. Lee, what is the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Yeah, it's tough to say one, so I'm going to say two, but I'll be very brief on them. So the first one is something that, both my parents instilled. My dad was the one who used to say this, but it was, look, no matter how good you are at something, there is always someone out there that's better. Someone out there somewhere else that's better. And I have that in the back of my head, and I use it to fuel. It used to fuel, hey, shoot another 100 pucks. Now it's, find 10 more minutes in your day to read 2 articles in the Wall Street Journal. Find a little more time, a few more inches in your day to make yourself better, to put yourself in a position to help you and your team and your family succeed. Because there's someone out there that's coming for you, and they're born with a little more talent than you. They're born with a little better than you, so you have to outwork them. The other is, mistakes will happen, and you have to just move forward. And this is where, this is something that it's another one I got from my parents. And I think about Tom Brady. I mean, the guy is the greatest quarterback of all time. He's thrown 191 interceptions. So the 191 times, the greatest that's ever lived has done the ultimate no-no. And what's he do after that happens? He runs off the field. He figures out why the interception happens, and he moves on. And you can't be thinking about it after you throw it, because you're going to throw some. And sometimes it's going to be your fault. Sometimes it's going to be the receiver didn't run the route right. Those are going to happen in life. When they happen, you have to learn from them, and you have to move forward quickly, because you can't look back. You can't change the past.
Well, Lee, we so appreciate your time, and we're excited to look forward and continue to follow your career and the growth trajectory of you personally and United Wholesale Mortgage. So we're fortunate to have you as part of the MuskOx herd. We appreciate your time and are excited to continue to follow your successes. Thanks for joining us today.
Brad, thank you very much. And there's a courtesy wave to close it out.
All right. I want to thank Lee one more time for joining today's podcast. I know I learned quite a bit from him today, and think there's so much power in the idea of staying positive, believing in other people, believing in yourself, and of course, continuing to work extremely hard every single day. I think Lee's a great member of the Muskox herd. We so appreciate his ability to, achieve business success and success in athletics. I know getting out for adventures is an important thing to Lee, and it's certainly something that's critically important to us here at Muskox. If you haven't yet checked out the website, it is now officially spring. It is time for you to go to GoMuskOx.com and find yourself some fantastic apparel for your next outing. As the weather starts to get a little bit warmer, you will be happy that you did so. One last time, I want to say thank you for Lee joining us on the podcast, and I hope you learned a thing or two today. Until next time, I'm your host of The Herd Has Spoken, Bradley Hoos.